Welcome to the April 5th, 2011 meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority. May we have a roll call, please?
Authority members: Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Prazian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Quintero.
Here. May we have your report?
The agenda for the April 5th, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, March 31st, 2011 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next?
Next is approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
The minutes stand approved as submitted. Next, please.
Next is oral communications. There was one card submitted. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision, and the matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for an investigation and a report.
Have one card, Herbert Milano.
If you can turn it on.
There you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Housing Authority Chair Quintero, members of the Housing Authority and city staff, my name is Herbert Milano. It has been my hope for many years that the Housing Authority would take on a periodic review of the quality of life indicators, because there's a segment of the population of Glendale that needs to have their needs and their deficiencies attended to, whether it be the conditions of the roadways, the lack of sufficient parkland to address the needs of kids between the ages of 5 and 18, the needs of recreation for adults before the age of 65, or the status of the economic conditions of people south of the 134 freeway. Part of that problem is reflected in a segment of the population that is unable to meet their obligations to the Department of Water and Power. In other words, they are late on their billing, and eventually they will get a 48-hour notice of impending shutoff. So thanks to Mr. Draymond, the city was able to compile some of the information I requested, and I have the following report that I compiled for you. So if I may have the PowerPoint. This PowerPoint takes information from the census, the year 2000 census, which is by zip code. I have not looked at the most recent census, but the population has hardly changed. So this tries to depict the ability to pay by customers by zip code. If I may have the next slide, please. Here are the top, let's see, it's about 8 zip codes that I compiled. The household comes from the census, and the final notice of shutoff comes from the report by the Department of Water and Power. Now, the problem with this report is that it doesn't tell me if the final notice was for electric only, electric and water. It doesn't tell me whether it's residential or a combination of residential and business. It's just a number. But given that number, we can still see a fairly significant impact that about 85% of those individuals in zip code 91204 are severely impacted. And of course, there are zip codes where the number really drops down to a very low number. If I can see the next slide, please. The next slide shows where that particular zip code is. It's in the very lower, the southeast side of Glendale. But 91201 was also impacted, 91205 was also impacted. If you can take me back to the previous slide, you'll see, for example, that for zip code 91204, there were 4,763 notices sent out. These zip codes, like 91205, are primarily renter, and it means that it's very likely that some of those families are receiving this notice every 2 months. In other words, every 2 months they're continually late to the very last potential minute to be able to retain for themselves some type of electricity. This is what I would call a parameter or an indicator that allows us to basically hopefully drill down into those numbers to see what the actual number is of families who receive during the 1 year at least one notice, because it's an indicator of hard times. So not only do we have a situation with the economic downturn, we also have a situation with the rates as well. If you go 2 slides over, please. Oh, there we go. Previous to that, there we go. In this slide, you see the last 10 years and the rate that impacts the residential rates. And as you can notice, the blue line is Glendale's trend in the last 10 years. It has always been substantially higher than the surrounding communities of Pasadena, Burbank, and Los Angeles. This last year, we had a downturn from Glendale, a little bit lowering, about 7%, and an increase from the city of LA and Burbank. But last year, the gap was very substantial, around 10 cents per kilowatt hour, and Glendale was at 17 cents and over 17 cents. And it actually has an impact. And as a landlord, I know that we've reduced our revenues by about 15%. In other words, we lower our rents, and still our renters have a significant problem. They're not able to pay the rent as easily as they were years before, and oftentimes they come to me, showing me their bill, figuring out if I was somehow at fault for their electricity being so high. But I think it's an indicator that I hope this housing authority would take a look further and give us some more additional numbers. Thank you very much.
Next, please.
Next is any authority member or staff comments.
Authority member, staff comments.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Stubborn on those numbers.
Well, I only saw the first slide.
That's
Artie, can you bring it back up again?
Certainly.
The numbers didn't look accurate to me. In zip code 91204, the numbers provided by GWP and were provided to Mr. Milano in his Public Records Act request as the total number of bills at 53,155, of which there were 4,763 turnoff notices. Those are final notices for a percentage of 9%. Out of those turnoff notices, there were actually 517 residents turned off, which is less than 1% of the customers in that area turned off, or 10.9% of the turnoff notices actually turned off. So I'm not sure what these percentages here frankly represent. They don't seem to be consistent with the numbers that were provided to Mr. Milano, at least the households, assuming those are billings. That's based on the numbers provided by GWP for the calendar year 2010 and provided to Mr. Milano. The average of all of the zip codes in Glendale, which are 3, 6, 9, 12 zip codes, total number of billings sent throughout the year, 569, 481. Pardon me, that would be number of bills, so there would be 6 of those in the course of a year. Of the total billings, we ran roughly 8% received a final notice of all the billings. Of those, roughly 0.75% actual turnoffs. And I'll note that in comparison with the other utilities in Los Angeles County, Glendale is one of the lowest of actual turnoffs of the municipal utilities in Los Angeles County.
Stubborn, I think you get those numbers like, take 4763 and divide by 5623, probably get close to 85%. I'm guessing. I can't do the math in my head, but it looks close.
Yeah, I'm not sure how households is derived at. I guess he might have divided total bills. You have to ask Mr. Milano. He might have divided total bills by 6 because we bill bi-monthly, which would give you some sense of the total number of households in a zip code area. But the information provided was total number of billings and the final notices, total numbers of final notices, because you'd need to then divide final notices in much the same way to arrive at households. Otherwise, you'd have a distortion. And then disconnects might actually relate to total number of households, so those percentages may appear larger.
And during the campaign, I talked about the study done by the LA Department of Water and Power comparing all surrounding cities and showed that we stood in the middle of surrounding cities in terms of electrical rates, not what Mr. Milano showed here, so I don't know where he got his numbers either. I think I would rather trust the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Well, what stands out is that we're actually, among the other municipalities, Burbank, Pasadena, et cetera, we actually have less turnoffs than the other
and actually our numbers, I think,
than the
were
other
the lowest
cities.
of the, I think it was 6 or 7 other municipal utilities that were included in the survey that we looked at.
So it's just-
we were like second from the bottom in terms of total notices, but we were actually on the bottom of actual turnoffs. Now, that would vary from zip code to zip code, but that was the city as a whole.
So, if this were an episode of Mythbusters, we'd call this busted.
Once again, Mr. Milano has taken a number, and I'm not sure how he's derived at households. I'll presume he's probably divided total number of bills by 6. One would say then maybe final notices ought to be divided by 6. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how you then begin to relate to households. But based on the numbers that were provided, which was total number of bills, total number of final notices, and actual disconnects, the percentages are relatively low, and as we compare with other utilities on the numbers provided by GWP, we are at or very near the bottom.
Actually, years ago, I heard for the first time the idea that statistics were lies and damn lies. And so I think that's what we get an awful lot of, a very slick presentation, but at the foundation of it, it's nonsense.
Everyone that's watching, if you're new to the area and you now have our power, electric, you can pay monthly instead of bi-monthly, which really helps you. They divide it in half, and it seemed like, at least for me, every time I saw my bill, it was twice as much as it had to be. And the fact that automatically they take it out of my checking account, half of it, the next month to take the other half, can help too for those that might have a little trouble paying their bill.
If I could just add one thing, but we're all human and we sometimes forget bills. One year, some years back, I happened to open the mail because my wife usually does. It was a final disconnect notice. My wife forgot to pay the bill. I came running down here, running over there. No, don't. But it was just one of those honest mistakes, in my case at least. So,
Mr. Draymond.
Well, I also understand that there's a number of, actually a considerable number of disconnects that are just people who have moved and have not closed their bill out, and it becomes a disconnect. And I would guess, although I don't have any statistics to prove that, but I would guess that you have a more transient resident amongst people that are renting than amongst people who are homeowners, probably. And that being the case, you would tend to see that in areas where there are more apartments. The other thing is that quote you were discussing, Mr. Quintero, is Disraeli, the famous
That's right.
British man. And the quote is, there are lies, damn lies, and then there are statistics.
Okay. I'll remember. It's been a long time. Well, and let me just say that obviously we're in the middle, hopefully ending, but in the middle of one of the worst recessions since the Great Depression, and there's no question that everyone is under tremendous economic strain. I'm sure if you did analysis of credit card bills and car payments and everything else in the southern portion of the city, and maybe even in the northern portion, there's some real distress. There's no question about it. But I don't understand the point that the speaker is trying to make. I just don't understand. He keeps on with this point, and yeah, we're in a deep recession, and sometimes people have problems paying their bills, period. Any other comments? Okay, next please.
Next is authority member and staff comments.
I have a comment. It's an election. Since today is election day, I'm working polls, and I should ask my fellow citizens to get up and go to vote. The law is very the turnout is very low, not even 10%. I'm asking you, would you get up and go to vote, please? Thank you.
Okay.
I would just echo Authority Member Prazian's comments that to urge people to get out and vote. Polls close today at 8 o'clock in the evening. And so if they have any issues with trying to find where they're supposed to go to vote, they can call 818-548-4000 or the city clerk's office.
And I might also ask the city clerk, how can we find out the results besides channel? I know Channel 6 will have it. How else will we find out?
If you can follow the results on our website, www.glendalevotes.org. That's glendalevotes.org, and it is listed up there on the screen right now for our viewers. The results will be on the internet.
All right, next, please.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.